The first sign of something unusual in the quiet mountain clearing was the sudden appearance of wooden beams rising above the cabin's simple roof. Neighbors gathered at a distance, their breath visible in the biting cold air, eyes wide with disbelief. The man who owned the small cabin was busy at work, hammering and measuring with a steady, deliberate rhythm. But around him, the murmurs grew louder. "What's he doing?" someone asked. "Looks like he's building another roof on top of the first one." Laughter broke out among the group, sharp and incredulous. "That's a waste of good wooden time," another neighbor scoffed. "Who needs two roofs? The first one's held up for years. This is just foolishness." It wasn't just the sight of the extra structure that confused them. It was the location itself. This was a place where winters were long and harsh, where every building was put to the test by relentless snow and bitter winds. The cabin sat alone on a slope surrounded by towering pines, miles from the nearest town. People here respected practical solutions: sturdy walls, thick insulation, roofs designed to shed heavy snow. But a second roof? That was unheard of. The man's neighbors shook their heads, whispering that he was chasing some strange idea that would surely fail. "Why fix what isn't broken?" they said. "The cold is part of living here. No doubling up will change that." Despite the cold, the man worked steadily, seemingly unaffected by the skepticism swirling around him like the winter wind. He paused only to adjust a beam or check a level, his face set with quiet determination. His neighbors watched him, half amused, half concerned. They had known him for years, a man who valued simplicity and tradition. This project felt like a betrayal of all that. Yet there was something about the calm confidence in his movements that didn't quite fit the image of a man wasting time on a folly. As the days passed, the second roof took shape, a layered shield rising over the original. The laughter continued, but began to soften, replaced by curious glances and whispered questions. No one could deny the oddity of the structure, but a few started wondering if there might be more to this than just stubbornness. Still, no one expected the results that were about to emerge. Numbers and measurements that would soon silence the doubt and turn skepticism into amazement. The cold persisted, snow piled high, and a man's small cabin stood there, wrapped not in one but two roofs. The neighbors' laughter was fading, replaced by a growing sense of anticipation. What had seemed like a strange, impractical idea was about to challenge everything they thought they knew about surviving winter in this rugged place. The experiment had begun, and soon the truth would come down not from opinions, but from facts. It's easy to dismiss ideas that seem unusual or even a little foolish at first glance. After all, how could something like doubling up on roofs really make a difference in the brutal cold? But many breakthroughs start exactly that way, by challenging what feels familiar and comfortable. If you've ever wondered whether unconventional approaches really hold up under pressure, I encourage you to stick around until the end. Here, the results aren't just talked about, they're measured and proven, giving us a clear picture of what works and what doesn't. If you appreciate practical solutions grounded in real-world experience, especially those that turn common assumptions on their head, this story might be right up your alley. It's not about flashy claims or quick fixes. Instead, it's about quietly testing, observing, and learning from what the environment and the numbers tell us. If this kind of thoughtful, curious approach resonates with you, a simple like goes a long way in keeping this conversation going. More importantly, I'd love to hear from you. Would you consider trying something like this on your own cabin or home? Maybe you've experimented with unusual methods before, or perhaps this sparks a new idea. Either way, sharing your thoughts in the comments helps build a community of people willing to explore and rethink what's possible, even in the face of skepticism. So as the snow continues to fall and the winds howl outside, let's watch closely how this double roof experiment unfolds. Sometimes the quietest innovations prove the most effective, and in this rugged winter landscape, that truth might be just around the corner. The cabin's struggle to stay warm was more than just an inconvenience. It was a relentless battle against the harsh winter that seemed to seep through every crevice and crack. As the snow piled higher outside and the wind's icy fingers clawed relentlessly at the walls, The temperature inside stubbornly refused to rise above a biting chill. Nights were the worst, with the mercury dipping well below freezing, turning the cabin into a cold box despite the fire roaring in the stove. Fuel consumption became a constant concern. Wood, the lifeblood of the cabin's heating system, was burned at an alarming rate just to maintain a semblance of warmth. The small stove, though expertly tended, struggled to keep up with the cold that infiltrated the space. Each log consumed felt like a desperate attempt to push back against the relentless cold, but the results were fleeting. The heat would build for a few hours, only to vanish as quickly as it came, sucked away by the cabin's poor insulation and drafty construction. This constant need to feed the fire was exhausting, both physically and mentally, especially when the supply of wood was limited and the effort to haul it inside was grueling in the deep snow. Traditional solutions, like sealing gaps with cloth or stuffing old rags into cracks, offered only temporary relief. Plastic sheets taped over windows helped somewhat, but condensation and frost quickly formed, creating new problems without truly solving the root issue. Heavy curtains and makeshift draft stoppers slowed the cold air, but didn't stop it. The ceiling was a particular problem area. Cold air settled above, chilling the headspace and making it hard to find comfort anywhere in the cabin. The heat generated near the stove rose, only to escape through the poorly insulated roof, leaving the living space perpetually cool. This was not about aesthetics or minor discomfort. It was a matter of survival. Prolonged exposure to such cold conditions risked hypothermia and illness. The family's well-being depended on finding a way to trap heat efficiently, to create a sanctuary that could shield them from the unforgiving winter. The inefficiency also meant more time spent tending fires and gathering fuel, cutting into the time and energy that could be devoted to other essential tasks. The cold was an adversary that robbed them of comfort, safety, and precious resources. Every failed attempt to improve warmth only underscored the need for a more thoughtful, effective solution. The cabin's design, while sturdy, was simply not equipped to handle the extremes of the season. The walls, though thick, lacked proper insulation. The windows, single-paned and drafty, were a constant source of heat loss. It was clear that traditional patchwork fixes were bandages on a wound that needed stitches. The challenge was not just to heat the cabin, but to hold that heat, to create an environment where warmth could be sustained without exhausting resources or sacrificing comfort. The urgency of the situation forced a reevaluation of priorities. It wasn't enough to have a fire blazing. The environment itself had to be changed to work with the heat rather than against it. This meant thinking beyond the immediate, beyond the flames flickering in the stove, and addressing how the cabin's very structure interacted with the cold. Every degree of heat lost was a degree of comfort and safety lost, making the search for a solution both a practical necessity and a deep-rooted hope for a better winter ahead. The idea of adding a second roof came about almost by accident, born out of frustration and a stubborn refusal to accept the cold defeat that had settled inside the cabin each winter. The initial thought was simple. What if there was a way to trap more heat, not just inside the walls or around the stove, but by creating an extra layer between the cabin and the harsh outside world? The second roof, in its most basic form, was just another barrier, an additional shield to keep the cold from sneaking in and the warmth from slipping out. Imagine the cabin as a small box, its original roof a thin lid that didn't do enough to protect what was inside. By putting a second roof on top, with a small gap of air between the two, the cold would have to cross two separate layers instead of one. Air, after all, is a natural insulator. This pocket of trapped air between the roofs would slow down the transfer of heat, making the cabin warmer without needing more firewood or fancy materials. In essence, the second roof was like wearing a thick jacket over a shirt, each layer adding comfort and defense against the biting cold. Despite the straightforward logic, the idea sounded absurd to most who heard it. For one, adding a second roof seemed like doubling the work for no real payoff. Why build another roof when the first one was already there? Conventional wisdom in cabin building was clear. Keep things simple, sturdy, and as direct as possible. Extra layers and complicated structures were often seen as unnecessary, even risky. People worried that the space between the roofs would trap moisture, leading to rot or mold, or that it would make the cabin heavier and less stable. There was also the concern about cost and time. Building one roof was already a challenge. Building two felt like an impossible luxury. Moreover, the idea went against everything traditional builders recommended. Cabins were meant to be tight and solid, with the roof directly connected to the walls to keep out wind and rain. Introducing a gap and an additional structure seemed to invite problems. Drafts could sneak in, snow could get stuck, or the whole thing could collapse under winter's weight. It was a leap into the unknown, a break from the tried-and-true methods passed down through generations. But the stubbornness behind the idea wasn't just about warmth. It was about rethinking how a shelter should respond to its environment. Instead of fighting the cold head-on, the second roof aimed to work with it, using simple principles of insulation and airflow in a way no one had tried before. This subtle shift in perspective made all the difference. It wasn't about building a bigger cabin or installing complex heating systems. It was about layering, about patience, and about trusting that sometimes the best solutions aren't the ones that look easiest or most obvious. Still, convincing others was tough. Many dismissed the idea as a needless extravagance, a fool's errand that would waste precious resources. Some laughed at the notion of a second roof, calling it a redundant extra or a sign of overthinking. Yet, beneath the skepticism, there was a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, this strange double-layered roof could turn the coldest nights into something bearable, even comfortable. The challenge was to turn that hope into reality without losing the foundation of what made a cabin a home: safety, warmth, and simplicity. Word of the double roof idea spread quickly through the small community, and the reaction was far from encouraging. Neighbors gathered on porches and in front yards, exchanging smirks and shaking heads whenever the topic came up. A second roof? What's next? A third one just for good measure? One man joked, folding his arms and chuckling. Others muttered about wasting money on a needless complication, convinced that the notion was born from either boredom or a desperate attempt to reinvent something that had worked fine for generations. Their laughter wasn't malicious, but it was sharp enough to sting. The local hardware store clerk, a man who had seen countless home improvement fads come and go, dismissed the plan outright. "You're just asking for trouble," he said with a knowing look, tapping the counter. "Double roofs mean double maintenance, double leaks, double headaches. And for what? A few degrees of warmth? You'd be better off stacking more firewood." These words echoed in the ears of anyone who dared to mention the project, planting seeds of doubt and reinforcing the narrative that the idea was more folly than foresight. At community gatherings, the man's vision became a punchline. Children mimicked the concept, pretending to crawl under invisible second roofs, while adults exchanged sideways glances that spoke volumes. "You might as well build a house inside a house," someone joked at the local diner, laughter spreading quickly like wildfire. The skepticism wasn't limited to words. Some neighbors avoided engaging altogether, offering cold shoulders or polite nods, but never support. Their silence spoke as loudly as the jokes, signaling that pursuing such an unconventional idea would only isolate its creator further. Even more discouraging were the passive comments from those who meant well, but couldn't suppress their doubts. "I admire your ambition," said a neighbor cautiously, "but sometimes simplicity is the safest route." Another warned about attracting unwanted attention or criticism, suggesting that sticking to tradition was a wiser choice. These gentle cautions, though framed kindly, carried an undercurrent of warning that amplified the social pressure to conform. It was as if the entire community, through subtle and overt means, was telling him that innovation was unnecessary, dangerous, and ultimately unwelcome. This collective skepticism introduced a new kind of challenge. The man found himself not only battling the physical demands of the project, but also the invisible weight of community judgment. Every step forward was met with an internal question: was this risk worth the alienation it caused? Yet, paradoxically, it was the very doubt and mockery that steeled his resolve. The quiet hope beneath the laughter became a beacon, reminding him that progress rarely comes without resistance. Each dismissive comment, each cynical joke, only strengthened his determination to prove that the dream of a warmer, safer home was not just a foolish whim, but a possibility waiting to be realized. Rather than shrinking back, he began to see the project as more than just a personal endeavor. It was a statement against complacency, a challenge to the status quo. The mockery of the neighbors, instead of discouraging him, became the fuel that ignited a deeper commitment. If the double roof was going to be built, it would be done not just for comfort, but as a quiet rebellion against the idea that tradition must never be questioned. In this way, the social pressure, meant to stifle innovation, ultimately became the invisible scaffolding that supported his resolve to see the project through. With renewed determination, the first step was to prepare the framework for the second roof carefully. This meant deciding on the spacing of the supporting beams, a critical factor to ensure the structure's strength without overloading the walls beneath. The beams were set about 24 inches apart, a standard measure that balances sturdiness with material efficiency. This spacing allowed enough room for insulation and ventilation, both crucial for creating a roof that could stand the test of time and weather. Choosing the right materials was next. Rather than relying solely on traditional wood, a mix of treated timber and metal brackets was used. The treated wood beams offered durability and a natural aesthetic, while the metal provided the extra reinforcement needed to hold the second layer firmly in place. This combination was not just practical, but also symbolized a bridge between old methods and new ideas, echoing the spirit behind the entire project. A vital part of the construction was creating an airflow gap between the two roofs. This gap, about 2 inches wide, was left intentionally to allow air to circulate freely. Without proper ventilation, heat and moisture could become trapped, leading to damage over time. By allowing air to flow through this space, the roof could breathe, reducing the risk of mold and helping to keep the interior cool during hot days. Small vents were installed at both the lower and upper edges of the second roof to promote this airflow naturally, using the principles of convection to push warm air out as cooler air entered. Insulation was layered beneath the second roof, but rather than simply packing the space tightly, the insulation was carefully chosen and placed to complement the airflow gap. A combination of rigid foam panels and reflective barriers was used. The foam panels provided a solid thermal barrier, keeping heat from leaking in or out. The reflective layers bounced radiant heat away, especially useful under the harsh sun. This layering was not just about keeping the house warm in winter or cool in summer. It was about creating a balanced environment that maintained comfort with minimal energy use. As the second roof took shape, the visual impact became clear. It wasn't just a practical addition, it was a statement. The slightly raised, airy second layer cast gentle shadows on the original roof, signaling innovation without erasing tradition. The craftsmanship was evident in every beam and joint, each one a small victory against the doubt that had surrounded the project. Throughout the process, attention was paid to how the materials joined together. Fasteners were chosen not only for strength, but for their resistance to corrosion, ensuring that the second roof would remain secure even in the face of rain and wind. The overlap of roofing sheets was carefully planned so that water would naturally flow off without pooling, a detail that combined function and form seamlessly. In the end, building the second roof was more than a construction task. It was a lesson in balance. It showed how respecting traditional structures while integrating modern techniques could yield a result both beautiful and resilient. The second roof stood proudly, a quiet defiance against the skepticism of neighbors and a warm shelter that would protect the home for years to come. As twilight faded into a deep, velvety night, the house stood quietly beneath the freshly completed second roof, its silhouette softened by the pale moonlight. A cool breeze whispered through the nearby trees, carrying with it the faint scent of damp earth and the promise of a cold night ahead. Inside, the air was thick with a mixture of anticipation and unease. Hours of labor, careful adjustments, and hopeful planning all culminated in this moment. a test that could either affirm the hard-won efforts or expose the lingering doubts that had shadowed the project from the start. The family gathered close, their bodies huddled together in the dim warmth of the main room. The flicker of a single lantern cast long, wavering shadows across the walls, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Outside, the wind grew stronger, rattling loose shutters and rustling the trees, as if nature were challenging the new roof's ability to hold firm against the elements. Each gust carried a subtle threat, a reminder that this was more than just a structure. It was a shield against the cold, and its performance tonight would define its true worth. In the quiet moments before sleep, every creak and sigh of the house felt amplified. The family listened intently, their minds racing with questions. Would the new roof keep the biting cold at bay? Would the seams hold tight, or would the night reveal hidden flaws? The doubts that neighbors had voiced echoed faintly in their ears, a chorus of skepticism that now felt almost tangible. Yet beneath the apprehension was a flicker of hope, a belief nurtured through months of effort and care. As the night deepened, the temperature dropped noticeably. Outside, frost began to settle on the ground, glimmering faintly under the moon's soft glow. Inside, the air held a crispness that was unfamiliar, a stark contrast to the usual warmth the old roof had struggled to retain. The family tightened their blankets, exchanging quiet reassurances. The new roof, with its blend of traditional craftsmanship and modern reinforcements, was put to the ultimate test. Hours passed slowly, each one stretching longer than the last. The wind's howling grew intermittent, as if testing the house's endurance in fits and starts. Yet, remarkably, the roof remained steady, its frame steadfast against the night's chill. Gradually, the family began to notice subtle changes. The cold did not seep through as before, nor did the walls carry the damp, penetrating chill that had been so familiar. The house felt different, sturdier, almost alive with the quiet strength of its new guardian overhead. When the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, it brought with it a fragile sense of victory. The second roof had endured the cold night's trial, silencing doubts and proving its worth beyond words. The family emerged from their rooms, faces flushed from the cold but bright with relief and quiet pride. Though the journey had been fraught with uncertainty, this night marked a turning point, a moment when fear gave way to confidence, and the house truly became a shelter in every sense of the word. The morning sun filtered softly through the windows as the family gathered in the living room, a tentative energy filling the space where the previous tension had lingered. The air was crisp, but inside the house, something unseen had shifted. The second roof, once just an idea and a hope, now stood as a silent sentinel against the cold. Yet, the true measure of its success was still to be revealed. The thermometer awaited, poised to tell a story that no one could deny. With careful hands, the father reached for the device, his fingers steady despite the lingering nerves. One reading came from beneath the original roof, where the chill had seeped in relentlessly the night before. The number blinked on the screen, low, almost discouraging. Then, the second reading, taken beneath the newly installed structure. The screen flickered, and the digits crystallized into a figure that stopped everyone's breath. 19 degrees warmer. The room fell into a stunned silence. 19 degrees. It was more than a number. It was a revelation. The warmth that had seemed intangible, the comfort they had hoped for but could not yet fully grasp, was now quantifiable. The father's eyes widened slightly, the corners of his mouth twitching into an unspoken smile. His wife's hand found his, squeezing it gently, the gesture speaking volumes without words. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. No one spoke because words felt inadequate. The skeptics, the doubters, the quiet fears that had haunted their nights, all were eclipsed by this simple, undeniable truth. The thermometer didn't lie. The cabin, their home, was now a place of refuge, a bastion against the biting cold that had once threatened to seep through every crack. Numbers replaced opinions, facts replaced feelings. The family had crossed an invisible threshold where debate gave way to certainty. The 19-degree difference was not just a statistic. It was a victory carved out of perseverance and hope. The cold no longer held dominion over their nights, and the house, once vulnerable, now radiated a newfound strength. As the reality of the moment settled in, a quiet pride blossomed among them. The children, still rubbing sleep from their eyes, looked on with wide curiosity, sensing something profound had happened even if they couldn't fully name it. The parents exchanged glances, a mixture of relief and triumph shining in their eyes. This was what they had worked for, proof that their efforts mattered, that their home could be more than just shelter, it could be sanctuary. The silence was finally broken by a soft, almost reverent exhale. The mother's voice, calm but filled with emotion, whispered, "We did it." It wasn't a boast, nor a declaration of finality, but a quiet acknowledgement of a hard-won truth. The 19-degree difference was a turning point, a moment when the abstract dream of warmth and safety became tangible reality. In that stillness, the family understood that this measurement was more than a number. It was a symbol of resilience, a testament to their unity, and the beginning of many cozy mornings yet to come. The cold had been met and overcome, and now, under the same roof, two roofs in fact, they had found warmth not only in the air, but in each other. The success of the second roof wasn't just luck. It was a simple yet powerful example of how nature and design work hand in hand. When the family looked around their home, they realized that the extra layer above wasn't just an add-on. It was a smart way to trap air, and that trapped air was the real hero of their newfound warmth. Air might seem invisible and lightweight, but when caught between two roofs, it becomes a natural insulator. This trapped layer slows down the movement of heat, making it much harder for the cold outside to sneak in. Think of this air like a soft cushion, gently holding onto the warmth inside the house. Heat always tries to move from warmer places to cooler ones, but when there's a pocket of still air, it acts as a barrier. This means the heat inside the home isn't rushing out, and the cold outside isn't rushing in. This simple principle of thermal buffering is what makes the second roof so effective. It creates a buffer zone where temperature changes happen more slowly, giving the family's home a chance to stay cozy even when the weather outside is harsh. Another quiet but crucial effect of the second roof is its ability to shield the home from the wind. Without this extra layer, strong winds would constantly push cold air against the house, carrying away heat and making the inside feel colder. But with the second roof, the wind meets a barrier first. Instead of rushing straight through, it loses strength as it passes over this outer layer. This wind protection means the house doesn't have to fight against cold gusts all day, so it can hold on to its warmth more easily. These combined effects, trapping air, buffering temperature changes, and blocking wind, work together without any complicated gadgets or technology. It's a natural system, quietly effective. The family's experience showed them how sometimes the best solutions are the simplest ones, grounded in everyday science that's easy to understand but powerful in action. As the days passed, the family noticed subtle changes. Mornings no longer greeted them with a chilly shock. The warmth that lingered felt steady, not fleeting. Even when the wind howled outside, the inside remained calm and comfortable. This wasn't magic. It was the second roof doing its job, using the invisible power of trapped air and protection against the elements to create a welcoming environment. In the end, the second roof became more than just a physical structure. It was a symbol of the family's creativity and their ability to work with nature rather than against it. By embracing these simple scientific principles, they transformed their home into a haven where warmth was preserved and cold was kept at bay. This understanding didn't just keep them comfortable. It gave them confidence, knowing they could face whatever the weather brought next, together under the same roof. At first, many of the neighbors had treated the second roof with a mixture of amusement and skepticism. They watched from a distance, chuckling quietly as the family fussed over what seemed like an odd and unnecessary addition to their home. The idea of layering a second roof Manipulating airflow and insulation in such a meticulous way felt like an eccentric experiment rather than a practical solution. Their laughter, though never cruel, carried the weight of disbelief. After all, the chilly winds and biting cold had been accepted as unavoidable facts of life for as long as anyone could remember. But as the days passed and the weather grew harsher, the mood in the neighborhood began to shift subtly. The family's home remained noticeably warmer than the others around it, a small but unmistakable beacon of comfort amid the biting cold. Curiosity replaced amusement in the eyes of many who had once dismissed the project. Conversations that had previously been light-hearted teasing now turned into quiet exchanges of wonder and questions. "How are they doing it?" some would ask in passing, their voices tinged with genuine interest rather than mockery. The transformation was gradual, almost imperceptible at first. A neighbor might stop briefly by the fence, glancing up at the double-layered roof with something like respect. Another would mention the warmth inside during a casual chat, wondering aloud about the materials used or the logic behind the design. The family, once met with skepticism, found themselves at the center of attention, not as objects of ridicule, but as sources of insight. Their patience in explaining the principles behind their approach, without arrogance or frustration, helped bridge the gap between doubt and understanding. Questions replaced jokes. Instead of dismissive smirks, the family received thoughtful inquiries. "Did you notice a big difference as soon as you finished? Was it difficult to build the second roof? Could we try something similar at our houses?" These questions were not just polite curiosities. They carried a genuine desire to learn and adapt. The neighbors' attitudes showed a quiet respect for the family's willingness to experiment and share their findings openly, turning what had seemed like an oddity into a community opportunity. This shift also brought subtle changes in behavior. Some neighbors began making small adjustments to their own homes, inspired by what they had observed. They would peer more closely at the construction, perhaps measuring or sketching ideas. Others talked amongst themselves about how this new knowledge could improve their daily lives, especially during the coldest months. The family's success didn't just warm their home. It sparked a slow, hopeful transformation in the neighborhood's collective mindset. Importantly, this change in perception never felt forced or exaggerated. It was a natural evolution born from clear, undeniable results. The laughter that once echoed was replaced not by blind admiration, but by cautious optimism and genuine curiosity. The community was learning to see beyond tradition, recognizing the value of thoughtful innovation grounded in simplicity and respect for nature. In time, the family's home stood not only as a symbol of comfort, but also as a quiet catalyst for change. It was a reminder that sometimes the most profound shifts begin not with grand proclamations, but with steady confidence in a better way, one that invites others to join rather than judge. Through patience and clarity, the family's simple act of adding a second roof had opened a door to new possibilities under the same sky, warming hearts as much as it warmed walls. Innovation rarely arrives wrapped in certainty or applause. More often, it looks awkward, even foolish, to those who haven't yet seen its promise. The family's choice to add a second roof, a seemingly unconventional approach, was met with quiet skepticism at first. Yet, it was this very willingness to trust their own observations over conventional wisdom that made all the difference. Their journey reminds us that true progress depends less on fitting in and more on thinking independently, testing ideas with practical problem solving, and letting the results speak louder than opinions. What stands out most is the family's quiet confidence in their method, a confidence born not from stubbornness, but from a genuine commitment to evidence and adaptation. They didn't rush to prove others wrong. Instead, they focused on whether their solution worked. This mindset, valuing outcomes over assumptions, can be applied far beyond off-grid living or home building. It's a call to question the way things have always been done and to explore alternatives with curiosity and humility. This lesson extends beyond the walls of their home. It encourages us all to embrace independent thinking, to tackle challenges with creativity, and to trust the process of trial and error. When we do so, we open ourselves to innovations that might seem strange at first, but ultimately lead to meaningful change. The family's second roof became more than a structural fix. It became a quiet revolution in how to approach problems and opportunities alike. If you've been inspired by this story or are considering your own unconventional solutions, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Would you try this method in your own off-grid or sustainable project? Have you encountered ideas that seemed foolish before they proved their worth? Your experiences and questions help build a community of practical thinkers who aren't afraid to challenge assumptions. Please share this video with someone building off the grid or anyone looking for real-world solutions that push beyond traditional limits. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories and ideas that show how innovation often begins with a simple question and a willingness to try something new. Together, we can learn that sometimes the best way forward is the one less traveled, under the same sky, under the same roof.